Howdy, all you delicious people! I'm here today to do my top 50 supernatural characters. After doing a poll with my community, I realized that okay, people like horror and supernatural stuff. Well, good because I do also. As well as like realizing that more than likely I haven't probably done enough of that kind of stuff because one, like it would probably really tire me out, and then also like I don't know exactly what is to be the most popular horror stuff because I feel that I do a lot of horror things that no one has ever heard of in their life. Because I'm like, yeah, I don't think I could do any of the slasher stuff and any of that actually be popular, but like, let's go on and just kind of figure out what could be popular to some people, I guess. So with that said, like it has been probably a number of days since actually putting this list together and then coming back to it, so I may not even know or remember exactly what all 50 of these characters were. But if anything, I have to go on and explain this to you. Within this top 50 list, there's going to be a character that is probably a supernatural character that is not to be living in a supernatural environment. So people will go on and probably look at some points in this list and just be like, why is this character on this list? Like, this person doesn't like live and breathe in a supernatural thing, and I'll just go on and have to tell you like, well, like it is technically a supernatural character. There is a bunch of templates and stuff that I looked into, as well as also watching a number of supernatural content and seeing what they end up putting on there. So like I had to go on and look through a lot of templates, like not only like the Draculas and the Wolfman, which I would have loved to have at some point put the Wolfman on this list, but honorable mention, sadly enough, Frankenstein, uh, supernatural characters like the Sandman, where he goes on and he is to blow this sand and have people go and fall asleep. Cupids, gods, monsters. Well, maybe not exactly monsters, but uh, really going on and trying to eschew as much as humanly possible. And maybe I'll go on and have more specific lists that are just to be like, hey, top 50 monster list and top 50 horror list is probably the next thing I want to go on and hopefully try at some point. Because I know a lot of people will probably just like, well, yeah, like I want a horror list. I get it. I know. I understand. And my list would probably have a number of obscure characters that everybody just like, ugh, like why this character? And I was just like, because I like it, because I enjoy it. So, with that said, if you were to go on and not like any characters on this list for whatever goofy reason, maybe you were to go on and state your favorite supernatural character, and I'll realize, yeah, like probably should have had them on this list somewhere. Um, I don't remember, but I think like I just recently watched like an Elvira movie, and I'm hoping that she at some point is also to be on this list. Because I don't know if I added her or not, but either way, honorable mention, Elvira, because I do really like that character's sense of humor, and also like it's kind of vague what Elvira actually is, and also like when someone was to ask, I was trying to figure out like, well, from what I remember, like there's a number of different kind of supernatural stuff that she could be, but oddly enough. So with that said, I know I feel that I'm going to tick a lot of people off because I could have also put the jack o' lantern uh, like thing from Trick or Treat, and that's technically a supernatural being. And I realize that now what a boo boo mistake I did. But like 50 slots is not nearly enough. Like I am gonna have to go on and realize that like this is the best I can do. So without further ado, now that I've gone on and spoken for 4 minutes about this list, not said a lick about it because it's going to take forever for me to just notch everything down, I want to also go on and thank the YouTube channel Geekvolution for giving me the template to be able to put this list together. Or otherwise, I would just be like, well, I want to do something like this, but how can I do it? And here it is, luckily enough. So, if you want a top 50 list of something, put it down in the comments below. If you are to be a fan of some kind of show that might have a number of seasons and whatever, logically, I'm hoping, like, some people probably want a horror list, because I may do that in the future. Some people may want to go on and have, like, maybe a Star Trek list. I'll probably do that. I've already done Power Rangers and DC and Marvel stuff, so kind of getting those out of the way. But then eventually I will just maybe do, like, generically, like, my top 50 TV shows or top 50 movies, because that might just be fascinating to just break that all down. And that might also kind of retroactively make people look at a lot of stuff that I've gone on and reviewed on the channel. Like, bizarrely, like, I think the shows and the movie things will probably have to be the most adjusted list that I've ever gone on and made in my life, because logically I'll just completely forget everything that I've ever talked about in any movie, because my life eventually becomes a blur. So let's get into this list. I'm sorry how long this is already taking. I'm boring a lot of people to death. Let's go into this list so you can go on and scrutinize it and hate it and just be like, well, I like Supernatural and he didn't have enough Supernatural characters on here from the show Supernatural. I thought that this was all going to be a Supernatural show list because that's a show I like. I like it too. I've seen, like, and I remember, like, all the 80, blah. I had gone on and seen, like, for the most of the point, all of the first 8 seasons of that show. And then after that, I watched it so heavily casually because the stories just got really, really bad. And then I watched the Winchester show, and I'm like, why am I even watching this? It's awful. Regardless of what they tried to up the ante with CGI and effects and whatever they were trying to do. But I'm like, no, this is such a Scooby-Doo show. It's ridiculous. But so, let's go into this. Hopefully Scooby-Doo is in this list somewhere. But let's go on. Number 1 is Eric Draven the Crow. I get it. This may not be a lot of people's number ones, or people like, oh my god, he said it, he did it, it's Crow. Yeah. So, we come to find out that a guy who has the name The Crow, or whoever he ends up being this week, Eric Draven, or whoever the heck else in sequel movies, we have a guy who's to be called The Crow, who has a crow sidekick alongside him, very ironically placed. So, we come to find out that when characters are to go on and kill the Crow, that the Crow becomes a weaker being and eventually loses his power. So that's really interesting. And this Crow character has had a number of movies. I believe that there are 4 or 5 now. There probably is going to be a billion other ones of them, and every single one of them has to just reboot this character every single time. And I'm like, man, like, we should just have a Crow TV series because we've already had one. And logically just kind of realized that, like, we can finally get past the rebooting stage of this character. Finally, in some content somewhere. So, I really like that the Crow is to be this bulletproof Ash-like character. That when you shoot bullets through him, his holes just end up healing, and he goes on to take down whoever he needs to in a very creative, interesting way. Kind of poetically kind of reversing whatever had gone on to have been done to him. And I found that to be rather interesting and enticing. And just looking at that very first original movie visual of that character, I'm just like, man, it is just so iconic. How, like, this character is to have perfectly represented, like, a gothic community, but then also, if you look at the comic books of the Crow, man, have they kind of weirdly done stuff with that character. But so, the Crow is rather interesting, and I hope at some point there is to actually be a really good Crow movie. Still, when there is to be one coming out, I'm like, there needs to be a better Crow film. There was a Jason Momoa Crow movie supposed to happen, but that just never happened, and it was supposed to be actually like the other more iconic Crow. So it is what it is. Also, when I started this list, the way I thought about it is like kind of pitching a TV show to somebody. So I really was to go on and like in the top 10, like figure out like who are going to be characters in a TV show or something to pitch to someone, and then after that, I just kind of was to put more and more just my favorite kind of characters. So with that said, let's move on. Number two, Ash Williams from Evil Dead. So a character who I think was the first man to put a chainsaw upon his hand. And you're probably going to go on and see that I'm going to go on and like a lot of characters that have chainsaws in a supernatural like setting. Just because they're also just visually cool on top of them having and wielding a chainsaw. But so I honestly would have put probably Negan here, but then I realized that Ash is just a funnier character, and also like you have to realize that Ash has just had a longer shelf life than Negan has in other comic books and stuff and projects and whatever. Ash has gone on to be in the Evil Dead movie franchise, as well as also being in Ash vs. Evil Dead. So just really interesting character and a very beloved by me character who also carries the name of Ashley, is to have stuff like Groovy and Boomstick to just kind of be added in his arsenal of words and whichever. But so having Deadites as a villain in his story is just kind of rather interesting than just saying that they're zombies or ghouls or whatever. Like creating their own kind of spin on their villains is just kind of really fun, and I like the fact that they did that. So, moving on, of course, some people may go on to really love the Evil Dead franchise of things, but then also may not exactly like Ash for whatever reason. They might go on just like other characters and whatever, but at the end of the day, I'm an Ash fan. Moving on. Number Trace is Alucard from Hellsing Anime. I get it. People won't understand who this is. People won't know who this is. Or some people like, oh my god, he blew my mind. Aw. But then again, also, I'm this is such an obscure tossing at the early ages of this. People are like, who the is this? Alucard, of course, is to be more than just your common variety vampire. Oh dang it! I probably could have put on any of the characters from the John Carpenter's vampire movie. That would have been freaking sweet. I probably could have put them over certain other characters that I put on this list. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Because man, like John Carpenter's Vampires is a really cool movie. If you've never seen it, you need to. It's like a go-to vampire flick because it actually has like an arsenal of people fighting off vampires. It's way better, I feel, than like the Buffy the Vampire stuff and all those kinds of things combined. It's freaking awesome. Just a bunch of men facing off against vampires. It's really cool. I wish that there would have like had a lot more kind of variety of different kinds of characters in that film besides what they actually had. Maybe there's a point where they can go on and reboot it because I'm sure they probably are going to eventually do that. Maybe make a series out of it. That'd be cool. But anyways, Alucard. Getting back to this, I'm getting a little distracted. So, Alucard, of course, is to be a character that at the surface is really good at wielding guns. And these guns are to have special weaponry within them. And we then also go on to find that Alucard just has these very much intimidating factor-like things to drive whoever he is facing off against. More than likely just crazy or dead. So we would come to find that it seems nothing can go on and logically kill Alucard in the traditional sense of vampires. So if this guy is looking for you, if he wants you dead, it's going to happen. Because Alucard is way more intimidating than a lot of other vampires and also has a lot of tricks up his sleeve, abilities to have that he's going to get you if he wants to get you. And the Hellsing anime, there's Hellsing and then there's Hellsing Ultimate. I went into Hellsing Ultimate just because I like the visuals a little bit better. I think there are certain bits of that story that I think are different than the other Hellsing thing, so I just went into that. But otherwise, Alucard is just an interesting visual character, and that just made me so biased to put him on here so early. It's an obscure choice. I don't care. I had gone on and reviewed some of the early episodes of the Hellsing anime Ultimate, so you can go on and check that out to maybe better understand this character, or probably just want to go on and check out the Hellsing Ultimate anime yourself. Moving on, number 4 is Kylie Griffin from Extreme Ghostbusters. Another obscure choice. I get it. A lot of people would go on and have a number of other Ghostbusters characters that are to be their faves. I like Egon, I like Ray, I like Winston, I like Peter, I like only Slimer, or I like only Stay Puft the Marshmallow Man, or I like Ooga Booga, back in town. He's back in town, Boogaloo. Yeah, I remember that Halloween Door freaking episode. Like, I've seen it 50 times, and probably more than that. I've probably seen it 100 times. But yeah, so I probably should have gone on at some point, just reviewed that one episode of The Real Ghostbusters, because logically, like, I've seen it so many freaking times. I think that was the one where I was kind of building up to eventually watch, but just, like, the views were just never there for The Real Ghostbusters stuff. It was sad. But also, like, there are oddly some interesting bit of viewership for Extreme Ghostbusters, so I was happy about that. But then again, I probably couldn't finish that show either, because it's very hard to justify completing any show on the YouTube thing, because, like, the first video could do really well, but then anything that follows diddly nothing. Or also, it's just people really like very specific episodes of the show, and I'm just like, I don't want to do that. Like, that is freaking, like, the worst. Because I'm watching things out of order, and I don't like to do that at all. I like to do things perfectly in order, with the exclusion of certain Power Rangers content that I've gone on and done. But anyways, Kylie Griffin here. She, of course, is to be very naivete. Within the early parts of her show, she is to go on and grasp this one ghost siren-like thing to try and hope that she can lure the ghost of her dead relative to her place. I think it was her grandmother. And come to find out, instead, she ends up luring a evil ghost that ends up going on to possess her. That ends up being, from a story arc perspective, like, a really just interesting choice of how they kind of put this together to introduce us to those characters and eventually transition from the Real Ghostbusters equipment to eventually giving them their own kind of equipment and their own kind of interesting, if not more dorkier, darker and gritty stories, which I thoroughly love and enjoy. Too bad that logically I could have made just a killing off of those videos of Extreme Ghostbusters, because I would have done the whole show. I would have done every single thing Ghostbusters related if it logically made rational sense on the channel to do so. But anyways, you're going to see some Ghostbusters-like characters. Plus also, I know what everybody's thinking. Shouldn't I have gone on and had, like, a gigantic character to eventually face off against gigantic, monsterish foes? And I honestly thought that through, and I was thinking, like, well, any Ghostbusters character could just make their way into a containment unit and specifically take out one ghost to face off against a one that would perfectly fit whichever scenario. So, for example, like, one of the Real Ghostbusters episodes was that there was this big, huge, massive, monsterish ghost-like character, and so the Ghostbusters took Stay Puft the Marshmallow Man out of containment unit and had Stay Puft the Marshmallow Man face off against, I think, this Mantis-like character, and that actually was a real fun episode. And I was thinking of that, like, while I was kind of putting this list together, of like, man, if only I could have probably put Stay Puft the Marshmallow Man, but I don't trust him. Stay Puft the Marshmallow Man, like, there's a lot of different scenarios that maybe his character doesn't exactly work out, but then again, he could be fun on a team, bizarrely, if they actually needed to call upon him. Moving on, number 5 is the Gill Man from Creature from the Black Lagoon. Honestly, in a team scenario, you would probably need a character like an Aquaman or an Aqualad, or more logically, Creature from the Black Lagoon or Abe Sapien from Hellboy. That actually fits more of a bill of a supernatural character. Because I think at some point you're going to have to go and have these characters face off against like the Loch Ness Monster or some goofy Ash-like thing that would completely take place within a water-like environment. So, considering there is a very much limit on actual aquatic, like, supernatural characters, like, I was just to go on and just be like, well, like, I really like the Gill Man from Creature from the Black Lagoon, and also there was to even be the Gill Man in the Monster Squad movie, so I was like, yeah, like, let's bring him on here. Like, I wish I would have gone on and had so many of these things that I'm referencing here somewhere within this list, but it just didn't happen. Moving on to try to bang out this list as quickly as I can. Number 6, Al Simmons' Spawn from the HBO series. So, I would have liked to have gone on and had Ghost Rider up here really high. But then I was to realize that Spawn is just a better supernatural character in some ways. Spawn is a much more supernatural Swiss Army knife-like character. And Spawn eventually is to go on and just have a ability to much more twist and turn certain things to his specific needs. More so than the Ghost Rider can with just one motorcycle or one shotgun or one this or one that. Like, Spawn, I think it's way more creative within a lot of his either live action movies or HBO series, and at some point may possibly have a King Spawn movie. I don't know. Like, I feel that we've kind of really are going to probably just end up being disappointed on that because Blumhouse is attached to that. I'm like, F that noise. Like, I don't like Blumhouse. A lot of Blumhouse stuff is just straight up garbage, so I have no faith in that being successful. But I want Spawn to be successful, because logically, I feel done the right way, this character can go a long way. And I feel that it's taking forever to have them go and turn around and do something Spawn related. And they should. I liked the Spawn series much more so than the live action movie because it's darker, and grittier. Man, if only I could speak the word of English today, it would be great. But so, let's go on and hurry up and let's move on through this list. Let's talk about other things. Number 7, Peter Vincent from Fright Night / Elvira. So, I love the concept of Peter Vincent from Fright Night. Peter Vincent can honestly be one of the best mentor supernatural-esque characters, and that's why I love him so much. And then Elvira ends up having really good sense of humors, as well as also being maybe just an overly attractive character that can go on and possibly distract somebody. Because it seems that for some oddballish reason, like, Elvira is to have a really, like, uncontrolled attraction about her. That's what I just really spotted within the Elvira film, and maybe that can just go on and just be like, well, like maybe that's just more than, or maybe that's just more than just, like, her having some kind of weird, uncontrollable attractability. Maybe she's just that attractive. I get it, but then again, I'm just like, for her to just have people just grab onto her, or just have these three boys just all like, oh, over her. I was just like, okay, like little bit much. Like, come on. Like, I get that she's smoking hot, but like logically, come on, people. Like, she's a human being like anybody else. But again, like, uh, we have people kind of questioning whether like she's a witch or vampire. I made also some conclusions that she could be like a succubus or an incubus or something. Oddly enough, that would have some uncontrollable attraction to her. But then again, what do I know? I could have made some clear other observations that probably would not have actually worked for the Elvira character, for one reason or another. Um, I wouldn't say vampire unless she actually drinks cow blood, and then also is to wear sunscreen a lot. So unless she's a daywalker, and then again, why would she still be so pale? I don't know. Uh, but regardless, because I've kind of seen certain vampires who like have different kinds of adjustments to the sun, and the sunlight doesn't actually kill them. Probably shows like, I think like Moonlight or something, would probably go on and tell you that uh, people or vampires can kind of walk during the day, or even being human, I think, has that kind of thing also. Moving on. But yeah, Peter Vincent, the idea of him just being this guy who's to have this movie marathon thing going on, and is to have this kind of supernatural monster movie knowledge, and then is to turn around and need to convince a guy named Gruber to, like, hey man, like, vampires aren't really real, like, let's give you all the kind of proof to uh turn this around to make you think that it's not. And then logically, Vincent Price goes on and looks within his little handheld mirror and realizes, whoops, yeah, this guy is a legitimate vampire. And then, like, that's what starts off the very first film. But I love Peter Vincent. And then eventually they end up doing the rebooted thing, and they kind of really made that character very odd and weird and whatever. But just changing with the times. Moving on, number 8, Michael Corvin, or Selene from Underworld. So Michael Corvin is so high in this list because after we had the both hybrid vampire werewolf thing, everybody has kind of been chasing that idea ever since. We would go on and have a number of games that people are to go on and play, that they are to go on and hope that there can be a hybrid, both werewolf and vampire like thing, and there just isn't a thing involved in the game. So they try to cheese it or cheat it or whatever. Eventually, stuff like Skyrim had like vampires and werewolves and stuff like that, and like everybody was kind of thinking that there could be a hybrid like thing, but of course there wasn't. So Michael Corvin was to be the very first person to have gone on and done a hybrid like thing of that, regardless of what you went on and probably saw in the other Underworld films. But also, I loved Celine's character because, like, she was one, a female character that uh, made me really go on and think that this character was one of a kind, for how like her abilities were much more unique, and like she was strategically a lot more smarter than I think a lot of other supernatural like characters. Moving on. Number 9, Ghost Rider Johnny Blaze. I say Blaze, but then also I like all the other Ghost Rider characters. Danny Ketch, Robbie Reyes, uh, I'm sure I'm leaving one or two out there somewhere. There's probably a female Ghost Rider out there somewhere. There's the Frank Castle Cosmic Ghost Rider. I said all this in the Marvel list. You can check that out if you like to. Uh, and you can also hear everything that I have to say about Ghost Rider in the very early stages of that Marvel Top 50 list. So if you are a Ghost Rider fan, maybe you're a Ghostbusters fan also. But if you're a Ghost Riders fan, I like me some of that Ghost Rider, but then again, there were so many other characters being put in this list that made me just drop further and further Ghost Rider down. Sadly enough, I just had to logically think of this list. more so than just, oh, Ghost Rider, my fave, and put it as high as I could. Moving on. Number 10, Scooby-Doo from Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? So, I only like Scooby-Doo from the early cartoons. I don't give a rip about any of that other crap. I can go on and I can have some fun and good times with Scooby-Doo and probably its live action films for how everybody hates those. And for however people hate the show Velma and are probably going to hate anything that comes into the future with Scooby-Doo because it's getting worse and worse over time because they've done this character for so long that they're not even trying to reinvent the wheel when it comes to Scooby-Doo because they can just kind of steal and copy and paste from everything that has already existed because they're lazy. Um, all the more reason for me to want to go on and like Scooby-Doo from the original series, and also that theme song, um, and the way that they just have that intro is just freaking iconic and awesome and great. Really, I probably could have gone on and put a lot more characters than Scooby-Doo on here, but I think any of the other characters are to be very bland or plain or whatever. Like, I like me some of that Velma. Like, Velma is freaking hot. But then also, like, to not have Shaggy next to Scooby Doo feels like a crime. But in time, logically, I would just say that Shaggy probably should have been next to Scooby Doo on this list because they're a duo partner. But then again, let's move on. Number 11, Connor MacLeod from the Clan MacLeod from Highlander. I know nobody really gives a rip about Highlander or immortal characters, but I love Highlander. I've heard that Henry Cavill is possibly working on a Highlander reboot that may more quite possibly be closer to the show than the movies. But regardless, I am to go on and like Connor instead of Duncan, even though Duncan went on to eventually be a character even more focused in later films, especially after the Highlander Endgame movie. But yeah, so eventually it's kind of sad how like Connor's movie franchise eventually went. But oh well, like there always is just to eventually be some kind of interesting Highlander content out there, and people can go on and be a lot more fans of Duncan than Connor. I get it. Moving on. Oh, Highlander, he's immortal. He has a kind of sidekick character called the Watcher that just kind of watches over him. But then also is to kind of give him certain knowledges and stuff that he's going to need, like how Giles was to, of course, be a guidance like character to Buffy. And I really wish I could have put Giles somewhere on this list, but for whatever reason or another, he never made it. Sadly enough, Giles should have been on this list. R.I.P. Giles. R.I.P. Whatever. Moving on. Number 12, the Boogeyman from the real Ghostbusters. So I was trying to figure out how to put a Boogeyman on this list, but the only one that really stuck out to me was the Boogie Man from the real Ghostbusters, and eventually how the Boogeyman had a story attached to Egon Spengler, hence my reason for why putting Boogeyman on this list. And realizing that Egon was really just terrified of the Boogeyman, but had to go on and face up against his fear because he realized that there was kids in jeopardy, and finally like putting an end to this Boogeyman character was one thing that he's like, I want to do this, I want to go on and I want to put the boots to this character finally. And plus, like, this character was really weird looking, but then also like just very iconic for the real Ghostbusters show. Hence why they eventually brought him back at certain points and this and that to just make for a very interesting show. Moving on, because I know how obscure this character really is. Number 13, the Djinn from the Wishmaster movie franchise. So, at some points, we would have different kinds of Djinn through the Wishmaster movies, and some people have their favorites, and some people don't, because they probably never even heard of Wishmaster. But I like the whole like wish fulfillment idea, hence why my biased opinion of putting him on here and on here so highly. At some points, there also is jinns in like the Supernatural show, barely, and I was just so like, that is such a huge missed opportunity. But Wes Craven was to have started off with the Wishmaster films, and then eventually, I think, kind of took it to other people, and so I am to go on and just thoroughly enjoy, I think, every one of the Wishmaster films, even kind of the later ones where like it gets to the point of like the Wishmaster not really knowing if he can go on and grant the last wish because of like, well, hey, like what exactly does this wish mean? And every time the Wishmaster is to try and go on and fulfill all these wishes, the whole goal is that he's going to try and unleash his Jinn army out onto the world and create all this chaos. So, as well as also Wishmaster on his own is creating a lot of chaos. And also we have a Wishmaster that goes on and is to just do a lot of graphic like wishes. Like one guy was to wish that a guy would F himself, and he goes on and does so. So really, yeah, like we do a lot of interesting things within this Wishmaster franchise, and if you've been sleeping on it, you honestly should because it's actually really interesting. Moving on, number 14 is Negan from The Walking Dead, of course. Yeah, we're gonna have a Walking Dead bit of characters in this list, and Negan starts it off. Negan is freaking hilarious. Oh my god, how he can go on and make the simplest things freaking funny is awesome. Like, I remember the one time where he turns the girl and she talks, or they talk about making lemonade, and he's like, make it good. And like, that's the thing that just stuck to me. As well as also, like having people like come from behind him and he's like, holy like, like you scare the out of me. And like this and that, and like, there might have been stuff that were actually firmly in the comic books, and there might have just been stuff that just Negan ad libbed and just ran with it, or whoever the actual actor of that was. But so, Negan is a really interesting character that makes you want to pee your pants laughing to. It's really just an awesome, fun character that eventually I think is to slowly but surely through the seasons of The Walking Dead, and then also that other show that he went on to doing. Because, like, man, like, he's really not as good as he used to be. Like, they really figured out a way to just make that character a little bit more plain and boring. And sadly enough, like, that's just the way that character went. Moving on, because I didn't even watch really much of the Negan slash um, uh, the Negan and the Girl show, whatever that one was. I don't remember the girl's name. Um, but I know that she was also from the Supernatural show, but I don't remember who she is. She was married to, or she was with Glenn. I know that, but I don't remember who that girl was. Sadly enough, it's my fault. Moving on to number 15, Dean Winchester from Supernatural. Finally, a Supernatural character is on this list because I like Supernatural. More than one Supernatural character will be on this list because I like Supernatural as well. Some people may not even know that Supernatural also has a animated series. Really? They do? Yes, they do. And more than likely, Dean is not actually voicing every single time on that show. There's a guy that sounds like him, obviously, and I kind of got a little ticked off because of that. But at least Sam is voicing Sam through most of the show because, heaven forbid, you probably had Jensen Ackles that was doing a number of other projects as well as also doing the show. So probably was like, dude, I'm not going to do this and that. No. Plus, also, he was probably voicing the Red Hood or some other uh, DC character probably at that time. Batman? I don't know. Maybe that was way later. Yeah, I know. I get it. But anything, I like how like Dean's story, like throughout the whole entire thing, like how it all broke down. Maybe not at the very tail end of it all, but like not even Jensen Ackles liked how his character ended. So with that said, Dean ends up being a very interesting character at some points, like stuffing his mouth with pretzels and just having his mouth just gonna blow up at one point. and there is that whole trickster episode about how the guy ends up saying that he was probed by the alien again and again and again and again, and Lady in Red just starts bizarrely playing with uh, the guy dancing with the alien and this and that in that episode, and then they're just like, okay, this is freaking weird. So there's a lot of goofy things going on in Supernatural that makes that show freaking hilarious, and then also just really fun to watch for the first 8 seasons, and then anything after that is just to be so freaking boring that I'm just like, oh my god, like, can we just like, whenever anybody was like, yeah, we're still gonna watch Supernatural, I'm like, how about we not? This show sucks. This show is not that good. Because in the later and later seasons, they just focus on one theme of every season, and I'm like, I would like there to be just a change of pace. Give me back to the monster episodes. Like, give me back to where they were going on and just kind of looking through a book to just see what monster they were going to face this week. And instead, it's just one themed thing throughout a whole entire season, and that just ruined the show, I feel. But regardless of my opinion, I liked the Supernatural show for how much I liked it for. And Dean Winchester just stuck out to me. I know I should probably have gone on and said Sam, but like, moving on. Coming up with excuses not to say why I say that. Number 16, Sam Oliver from the show Reaper. So, for those of you who have no clue what this show is, because I'm sure you don't, because when I was to go on and review the pilot, everybody's like, I'm not watching this. But that was also very early in my YouTube time on this channel. Because I've been doing this for a very long time. Don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years. But also I've been here for years on this channel. And it is what it is. So, Reaper. Sam Oliver. Reaper, this show was freaking awesome. So, we have a guy who we come to find out his parents had sold him to the devil. His soul, of course. So, the devil forcibly tells Sam that he's going to be a bounty hunter for the devil. And we would come to find that Sam is also working at this retail store. And Sam ends up going on to start getting these oddballish like items to then try and face them off with whatever demon he's going on and facing off that week. And there's a lot of comedy in this show. Sam has a really good kind of cast of characters to play off with the one guy who ends up putting a taped glove over his hand. It's freaking weird. I think that character's name is Sock, or the nickname of the character is Sock. But there's a lot of good stuff coming out of that show. And if people do not care to watch it, then that's fine. But logically, there's only a certain number of seasons of it that exist. And also, I think that you can probably go on and find it somewhere and probably watch it for absolutely free. So, I hope that there is a fan base for this show, because my god, is this show fun. It's so good. And then also, Sam has this like love interest that he's just desperately trying to get to. But then, kind of for what Sam is kind of doing as a devil bounty hunter, like, him having to do that and being with this girl kind of conflicts. But if anything, the twining tale of the story eventually it just gets very creative. And also has him teaming up with angels at some point, or characters and whatever. Let's move on. Let's get into 17. 17 is Bill and Ellie Williams from The Last of Us. So, I would have wanted to have, honestly, Bill on here a lot higher, because Bill from The Last of Us is to be a guy who is to be this prepper, and none of any of these other characters are to have that skill set. So, Bill had gone on in The Last of Us to realize when stuff was going down, And so Bill seemed to have this whole underground thing like prepared for the world to end. So when everybody was to have gone on and left his town, Bill took it upon himself to then uh like barbed wire fence like a whole thing around his place by going to this hardwood store and taking everything that he needed and really making a ton of traps and a ton of things so that way no one and their brother would justify to go near his place, but they continue to try to. But so Bill was so well planned, but still like at some point zombies and just people kept trying to get to his place because him and one other guy just staying there like is not enough to just consistently keep watch. Like at some point you just need a whole town of people to make sure that your place isn't going to get infiltrated, and even that isn't good enough. So uh with that said, Bill is a really just high intelligent character. And also, I love the fact that he was to go on and say, "This is not an Arby's." God, I love that line. It's so funny. But then also we have Ellie, who, if not to be a character that is to be a very strategic, intelligent character, uh, she is very quick witted. She is to really be a person you do not want to mess with, and you come to find that out through the very first season of The Last of Us. As well as also kind of seeing her in the video games, which they kind of like they focus on her because they realize like how everybody is finding her to just be a beloved character, whichever. But so Ellie is just really a fun character, and she's also just very young compared to everyone else on this list. So, hence my more reasoning for wanting to put her on here, just to make a much more variety of a list. If anything, I would have also wanted to have at some point possibly tried to fit in the Stranger Things people. More than likely, probably just 11, because I probably like her more so than anyone else. But I probably wanted to have also put it all the Stranger Things characters probably in a science fiction top 50 characters list if I was actually logically going to do that. And also, I probably put some psychic characters in this list. Uh, but then again, I probably should have put 11 in there somewhere. But, anyways, moving on. Number 18. Juliet Starling from Lollipop Chainsaw. So, I really enjoy this video game just because it's very raunchy and has Michael Rosenbaum just logically voicing a head. And that, of course, is really funny. But Lollipop Chainsaw, I would love to hope at some point ends up getting to be used somewhere other than just a video game, because I think enough time has passed that they could probably go on and have this character at some point be an anime or maybe be a movie, and eventually retroactively everybody would be like, okay, what the heck is this Lollipop Chainsaw thing? And it seems that at one point they are probably going to go on and possibly resurrect Lollipop Chainsaw to maybe like remaster the game or put this character in possibly a Xbox store or something like that. And I hope that that does actually happen so more people can randomly find this character and want to go on and play this game again. I had gone on and seen a pretty decent amount of playthrough of Lollipop Chainsaw, and I just really enjoy it. So, hence my reason for this being so high. I probably could have put a number of characters from possibly High School of the Dead on here, because I like how like Lollipop Chainsaw and also High School of the Dead is kind of very similar in a way. But anyways, moving on. Like I don't think any one character logically stands out in High School of the Dead, so maybe that's my one reason for not listing them on here. But that's also an anime. You can check that out if you'd like to. Moving on, number 19. Michonne from The Walking Dead. A lot of people be like, finally! Jesus Christ, why wasn't she way higher on the list? I get it. She's an innovator. She is to be a woman that is to have some zombie sidekicks at her leisurely time of being on the show, in the comic books, so on and so forth. And she does have a very heartbreaking story. And really, like, I did like the Rick Grimes Michonne um show for the most point. Like, they were really like slowing and milking that thing out, and I was just getting more agitated about the show every time I was to see just one episode. Just like, man, like, they didn't do enough of anything in this show. Like, come on, like, I want to see them more going on and actually facing off against zombies instead of having them like cry and think of what their life could have been like if everything was normal. Like, I didn't care about any of that garbage. I want to see zombie fighting. I want to see more of that. Like, I don't care how many times they've done it in The Walking Dead. More zombie fighting, please. Figure out how to make the zombie fights more interesting, like how they did in the Daryl Dixon show, where they eventually made acid zombies. Moving on. Number 20. Josh Levison, George Sands from Being Human. So this is the werewolf character from Being Human. I probably could have also put like Sally and her alternate from the UK show, but I just like the werewolf character better. And also, the werewolf character eventually has a girlfriend, and so like that kind of character, like there's a lot more going on, I think, with that character than any of the others. I feel, in my opinion. But then again, everybody from Being Human would probably have their own favorites. They're probably like the vampire character, who in the US version is Aiden, but in the UK version it's somebody else. Um, I think it's Collins or something. I'm not quite sure. But I wanted to put Being Human on here because I really do like the show. I justified trying to put the UK version on here, but it was very difficult actually trying to figure out ways to watch that show, as well as also uh, every time I was to try and consistently go into like a Being Human project, no one cared about it. So I was just like, well, like, this sucks. But then again, like, no no horror or supernatural thing I feel is to really be popular on YouTube. Nothing of the sorts. Like, logically, you can probably look at a number of YouTubers and their horror stuff is to be really popular just because either they only do horror like things, or also there is an it factor beyond them just logically being very in the know about whatever they're doing, because more than likely they're just really good looking or some other it factor that, like, they just know more than anybody else could logically know about movies and shows, and they just are just banging every video out like it's nobody's business. And good for them. I'm happy for them. But then also, like, that just makes me realize how dumb I really am. As well as also me stating all of this. Let's go on. Let's go into 21. Matilda Dixon, the Tooth Fairy from Darkness Falls. So, I really thoroughly loved the movie Darkness Falls. I wish I could have had this Tooth Fairy character much more higher on the list, but logically I figured it took me a while to even remember this character, and then also I thought that it was so obscure that people would all go on to just be like, why is he putting this character on here? Because I love this horror film or supernatural movie. If anything, I would want to have Darkness Falls on a top movie list so freaking high if I could remember it every time I'm gonna go on and do a list. Like, this movie is the freaking bomb. So, Darkness Falls is to be about a Tooth Fairy character that is collecting kids, it seems. And she goes on and goes after them in the darkness, kind of like a boogeyman. So, we have Dixon here that is going after these certain kids and or certain even adults that they try to figure out a way to face off against her. They go on and they have a number of flashlights, lanterns, and are to have a number of ways to try to defeat this character. But then eventually it all becomes about like where they are to end up being. And eventually like it just becomes this like, hey guys, there's this one light on in this area, we have to jump to that one area or she's going to snatch us and kill us, and we're going to die. So it kind of almost like the movie turns out to almost be like this kind of floor is lava kind of thing, or this race to get to the light, and it just makes for a very more interesting film than a lot of other stuff. So if you've never seen Darkness Falls, I feel that you need to, because this is a great movie that a lot of people are not caring to look into. But I love it. It's great. Moving on. Number 22, Daryl Dixon. We're getting into the Dixons here from The Walking Dead. So, like I said, I'd gone on and seen Daryl make his way to France or Europe, whatever, within his own show. And the show actually was rather interesting, even if again, I'm like, man, like the Walking Dead stuff has really just been played out. Like they tried as much as possible to make the zombies have acid, and they made it more unique in that show. But I'm only really gonna care about a lot of the early stuff from Daryl. How he went on to that one kind of gang, and they were kind of claiming what was theirs, and Daryl never like went into that kind of stuff. He never claimed any of his stuff, and other people were just kind of taking stuff from him, and like Daryl was just like, oh, okay, whatever. Like, well, but then eventually, once he goes on and kills a guy, he's like, oh, I'll claim this, and that was kind of funny. So Daryl Dixon, for how really iconic his wings are, and how he had a brother named Merle that I wish I would have had on this list somewhere, because I really loved Merle, as well as also liking Daryl as well. Moving on, number 23 is Hellboy. Probably a lot of people are just like, thank God. Why isn't Hellboy? You mentioned Abe Sapien. Why didn't you have Hellboy on the higher part of this list? Because I also feel that Hellboy is very obscure. Also, there's to be so many times where Hellboy is to be getting rebooted at this point that like he's kind of lost his value. Like we have the original Hellboy film, and then we have the Golden Army, and then we have the other Hellboy film, and then we also have Hellboy the Crooked Man that is bizarrely coming out now, which I'm assuming it's like they're trying as much as possible to show you like the effects that they're doing in that film, and like the Crooked Man does look really interesting as far as a villain against Hellboy, but I feel that everybody is going to quickly forget about that film, even if they know it even exists. So yeah, like this film is just going to go nowhere. Uh, but that's just sad because logically, everybody just wants Hellboy to continue to exist somewhere. Hellboy is just a interesting character that is to also be his own kind of character within Hell, and eventually we get the red right hand character that is to symbolize with him, and also like the villains that he faces off against within his movies are actually just rather interesting, and the way that they kind of just take the characters are really all interesting. There was also to be animated movies that I saw with Hellboy as well, and I thought those were actually rather cool. Moving on, because we've already been past an hour here and we've only gotten halfway through this list. David from the Lost Boys. Probably a lot of people could be like, finally, a Lost Boys entry. I get it. David, the Kiefer Sutherland character from The Lost Boys, really just stands out to me as being a very iconic character in the Lost Boys movie, even though he's just another vampire character. Like, there's nothing that is to be so unique about David compared to any of the other vampires in that film, even to the point of there being a vampire character fighting against him. Yeah. But The Lost Boys is just a very creative and interesting vampire fighting film, as well as also bringing in the Frog Brothers and this and that. Like, there's a lot of things that I think are just more interesting going into The Lost Boys than probably a number of other things than actually just David and uh, several other characters. But so, with that said, regardless, David is a very interesting evil vampire character. And like, you can't go on and not have him on this list as far as vampires is to be concerned. So moving on, some people would say that David from the Lost Boys is to be their favorite vampire character, and I get it. I get that just iconic thing that you've probably just grown up on, and you love that thing, and maybe you watch all the other Lost Boys movies that just really stuck to uh, Corey Feldman's character, bizarrely. I don't know why they did that, but hey, like, it made just interesting to see how the Lost Boys, Frog Boy or Frog Brothers characters were playing out in those sequels, even though they kind of just really went nowhere. Moving on. Number 25, The Creeper from Jeepers Creepers. So I get that a lot of people just say that this character is just to be some monster character and it doesn't make sense for him to possibly be on this list. I feel that the Creeper is honestly a Frankenstein-like character. In all honesty, like, I don't think there are other Frankenstein-like characters. I probably could have, at this point, put the classic characters instead of the Creeper on here. But uh, I like how the Creeper is to have really had an interesting movie franchise, with the exclusion of that last one. That was, God, what was that? But the Creeper ends up getting strategically more and more interesting as these movies play out. Maybe not in all of the films, but again, like, the Creeper ends up having this arsenal within his one vehicle to turn to, and there is just an awe about these films. And eventually, how the Creeper grows wings and eventually is to just be all kinds of just interesting, as well as also delivering us a hero-ish character that has these kind of just psychic abilities. Just really interesting play out of things. You know what, in all honesty, for how the Creeper can go on and start killing like the Justin Long like character, why isn't that the Creeper didn't have his own kind of psychic abilities or whichever? But maybe that just doesn't work out for the Creeper for some goofy reason. Or maybe he does have some kind of abilities of some kind. Moving on. Maybe that's why he's as skilled as he is, just because he's like, yeah, I know exactly how to throw this and it'll work out because I just have this ability. Moving on, because there's an hour here. Number 26, Beetlejuice. So, I love Michael Keaton, and then when I was to have gone on and realized, oh yeah, he's Beetlejuice, I was like, all right, yeah, like, Beetlejuice is almost kind of the villain character, but then also, like, he can be used for the force of good. And like, it's all just kind of like where you aim this character to really be his best bet. And I'm also kind of curious what Beetlejuice is going to deliver, even though I'm assuming that it's going to be at a possible much more lower budget than the original film. But then again, who knows? Maybe they're going to just do a ton of just special effects to just make up for the lack thereof, seemingly, of a budget of the movie. But then again, I also don't like that there's Ortega in that movie. I really don't. Um, if in all actually they would have gone on and had another Beetlejuice movie, I would have liked to have more rested on the original characters than going on and just finding the flavor of the year actress to come into this film. whatever. It is what it is. If she wouldn't have gone on and done Wednesday, no one would have cared about this character. Yeah, she was in the Scream movies, but nobody really looks at that girl as like, oh my god, she is a unique, one of a kind character from Scream, because it's always going to be Neve Campbell or someone else. Moving on. Number 27, Rodney Skinner from League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I probably could have also put the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde character from League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, but really, I just like Rodney Skinner here. So, Rodney Skinner in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is the Invisible Man within this team. I get it that he's not exactly a supernatural themed character, but at some point he goes on to fight against himself. So, like, he fights basically another invisible character, and so there could be some stuff that is just kind of amended here. So, and I was also trying to think of, like, okay, in my eyes, like, who is the most fun invisible kind of character, and the only thing that I could really think of was Rodney Skinner, because I'd gone on and seen other kind of Invisible Man like shows, and then also like I haven't exactly seen the original black and white Invisible Man movie, but I want to go on and check it out. I only know the Invisible Man from the Abbott and Costello movie, oddly enough. But with that said, Rodney Skinner is just really fun and interesting. Moving on. And also, he's just a kind of visually interesting kind of Invisible Man character compared to all the others. So let's move on. Number 28, Brooklyn from Gargoyles, the Gargoyles Disney show. I get it, a lot of people love Goliath, or maybe even Lexington, or Broadway, or whatever the heck else all the other characters are. Hudson, whoever those other people are. But I like Brooklyn. I like that he is to, of course, be the color red. If anything, I probably could have put Lexington, the yellow and or the yellow and gold looking one, gargoyle, like alongside him, because I think they work well together. And then also I can like the yellow and gold looking gargoyle as well. I liked a lot of the side characters on the movie. I didn't really like Goliath. Like, even though he was voiced by Keith David, and they focused so much on Goliath in that show, it was ridiculous. But I was to go on and just find other gargoyles just kind of more visually interesting than Goliath. But I think when I actually had the action figures, I did play more with Brooklyn and Lexington, and then I was to kind of eventually at some points play with Goliath. But oddly enough, I think they ended up being forced to be Power Rangers villains, because logically I didn't have enough action figures. So I just had to kind of fit like how all the action figures were to just kind of technically fight together, because I just had a lack thereof. And then I also just needed to get really creative. Moving on. Also, just the gargoyles eventually going into that clock tower and going from being involved in the past and somehow being revived in the more modern day. Very interesting tale. I've gone on and done a review about certain episodes of Gargoyles, and that theme song gets really freaking annoying. But anyways, let's move on here. Number 29, Scott McCall or Scott Howard from Teen Wolf. In all honesty, I was to have gone on and wanted to review the Michael J. Fox Teen Wolf movie. I actually had it prepared, and so eventually I might get to that. But I've already done the Teen Wolf show at some point and really do enjoy that bit of content. But I don't think Teen Wolf is whatsoever or much of all popular, or really, I am to not be the person to make it popular, in all honesty. So, regardless of how I naturally love supernatural things and whatever, not everything works for me. But yeah, like I had heard that Teen Wolf had gone on to like put together an actual Teen Wolf movie, and I'm just so happy about that. But logically, I hadn't gone on and completely finished the Teen Wolf show, so it's kind of weird for me to have gone on and also reviewed the movie, when I'm not completely sure about how all these characters were to have turned out within the show. Moving on. Also, like I would have loved to have fused like both of these characters, both Scott McCall and Scott Howard, together to be like a basketball. God, what was the show sport? Uh, Lacrosse character, whatever. That would have been really interesting to have a Teen Wolf that just looks visually just kind of like a smashing of those two characters together, because technically it's both Teen Wolf. But anyways, maybe at some point they could be duo together. Wouldn't that just be a fun image? Moving on. Number 30. Buffy Summers and Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I probably could have gone on and listed a number of Buffy the Vampire Slayers characters. I probably could have also listed some characters from the Angel show, because I like that as well. But sadly enough, the only ones that I could have rationally would have wanted to put on here was Buffy and Spike. Spike, I think I like him more from the Angel show than I ever really do in the Buffy show, because I feel like in the show they didn't know exactly what to do with him. They just wanted him to stay on the show because they didn't have Angel, because Angel was doing his own spin-off thing. So, but like if anything, I do really like me some Spike. But then again, I could also like Xander, Willow, Giles. Xander had a girlfriend or a wife or something. I really liked her too. Giles, I think, had a woman. I think somewhere in the show. And then eventually, like some of the Angel characters, I don't remember any of their names, but I liked a lot of them, like Gunn and Cordelia was to eventually go on to the Angel show. The other guy who was supposed to like replace Giles, but then he just shuffled off into the Angel show. Like I like him; he's a good actor. But anyways, at some points, the Angel and the Buffy show tended to cross over at some points, and just made for interesting stories. But logically, people can go on and also just like the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie instead of the Buffy the Vampire Slayer show, because it seems bizarrely enough, when I was to have gone on and started to actually review the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie, I realized bizarrely that the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie was actually trending. Don't know why, but maybe it's bizarrely on YouTube for some reason. I don't know. It's just trending for some goofy reason. Moving on. 31. Van Helsing, Hugh Jackman. I know a lot of people probably don't care for this film, but I like the fact that like Van Helsing was not just facing off against vampires in this movie. There is a barrage of stuff that he faces off against. Like at first, it's kind of like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, and then it's a werewolf, and then it's vampires and Frankenstein's. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff that they try to do all in this one movie, whether it's visually appealing or really not. And then I also like that Van Helsing becomes a werewolf in this film, and it just has a battling off between the vampire and the werewolf. And also, you just have that kind of like priest or friar like character that is kind of delivering some comedy and jokes and whatever. So, and you also technically get the same girl who played Celine from Underworld to also be in this movie as this kind of sidekick like character, as well as also her being realizing that her brother is to be the latest werewolf character. Very interesting story, I feel. And I also probably could have put a number of other Van Helsing like characters or vampire-ish characters, and I clearly didn't put enough of them. I didn't put enough witches in this thing either, and I feel horrible about it. But then again, there are so many different kinds of supernatural like things that I had to pull from here, and a lot of people are going to question my goofy choices. Moving on. 32. Dr. Tom Jackson / Mr. Hyde from the show Jekyll. So this show, Jekyll, was a mini-series, and I loved it. And then I also really loved the main actor in this show, so all the more reason for me to want to go on and find other content that eventually he was in. And then surprisingly, that same content did really well on the channel. At some point, I'm also kind of thumbing through to see if there's other kind of content that involves that actor that may at some point do really well on the channel, forcibly. Uh, but then again, like, logically, I'm just hedging my bets here to just hope that there's something on the channel that just does well for once. But then again, uh, Jackal is a really fun show where the Hyde character starts to sing, uh, like, in the jungle, the mighty jungle. Yeah, like, this character just gets really wild and really fun. And also, you have both Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde having these tape recorders to one another, like, kind of having these upsetting moments with, like, hey man, like, can you ever go on and tell me where you park the car so I know where to go when I get out of here? Uh, because uh, Dr. Thomas Jackman ends up going on to let the Hyde character out. But then again, uh, Jackman goes on and tells the Hyde character that it's like, well, hey, if you go on and you kill anybody, I will know, and I will go on to um, the authorities, and uh, I will of course go on to confess. And so, like, it makes for just an interesting dynamic for these characters to just have a little bit of fun, as well as also the Hyde character doesn't really know that Jackman has a whole entire family, and then he finds it out, making for a much interesting play out of things. This show, I feel, is just so underrated, but a lot of people don't care or know about it. So sadly enough, let's move on here. And I love how he said patio. In one of the episodes, he says patio. It's funny because of his accent. Moving on, David Kessler from American Werewolf in London. In London. I don't know why I didn't correct that. It should be saying in London. Man, I probably realized that I probably had that on this list and probably didn't correct it. It's David Kessler from American Wolf in London. I know Paris is the sequel one. Whatever reason I had Paris on the mind here. Because of the other Werewolf in Paris movie. But yeah, this is David, who ends up going on to fall in love with that nurse character, and then he turns into a big, massive, raging werewolf, where he goes on and sees the spirits of everybody he's gone on to kill, or his best friend. And so, the further and further that direction takes in that film is very dark, because we immediately have the one uh, best friend of David who's telling him it's like, hey, you need uh, to like to end yourself uh, because like you're gonna keep killing, you're gonna keep becoming this werewolf, and like I guess there's no easy way to just kind of cage this guy up every night. So yeah, like it is really interesting tale of a werewolf story, and the transformation sequence is a lot more iconic, and I think kind of set the bar for transformation stuff for werewolves going forward. And a lot of people would not want to go on and ever do that kind of effort into transformation stuff. But it really just set the bar very high for a transformation sequence. Moving on, because based on the people who did the makeup. Number 34, the genie from Aladdin. I know that this is a very weird supernatural character, but if I can go on and put Jin the Wishmaster on here, I can also put freaking Robin Williams, genie from Aladdin. Because man, like the genie from Aladdin could be a very annoying character. And I mean, yeah, he's very all over the goddamn place. But then also, he is really funny. He's really fun. And eventually, like, him needing to be helping consistently Aladdin within that show just kind of makes for an interesting way of putting that character in these scenarios. We would have this genie that is going on and pulling off all these kind of references and stuff from a number of different things that doesn't probably exist within this specific timeline of Aladdin, but it just all the more makes for just kind of funny um, things going on here, and we can probably assume that a genie probably has the ability to probably time travel, to know every bit of everything that is going on in the past, present, and future. We have to just naturally assume, because this is a very powerful, omnipotent being. And in all honesty, I was also so tempted to just go on and probably put characters like Dr. Manhattan in this list, for honestly how he is to be a god-like character in a lot of eyes. Or I almost could have probably put a number of just comic booky god-like characters, or Thor, or Loki, or whatever, or Doctor Strange on here, because they're actually just supernatural characters. But I feel that Thor and Loki didn't make much of my other comic book list, so I also didn't want this list to be completely saturated with comic book characters. I just wanted to also leave it up to movies and shows. Moving on. Number 35, Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street. I know a lot of people could just say that this is a horror character or a slasher character, and it probably doesn't perfectly fit the supernatural realm. Well, in all honesty, having Freddy Krueger go on and haunt people's dreams made me go on and think of characters like the DC character Sandman that was to be on the Netflix series, or made me go on to think of like the Sandman who goes on and blows like a little stick of sand and makes people fall asleep. I immediately was to just go into that realm of like, well, I think Freddy Krueger was also in a fan movie with a bit of Ghostbusters characters and facing off. So like logically, like that's kind of where I went, was just that I felt that Freddy Krueger is not just a slasher character, he's also a supernatural character. So that's just kind of where I went, because he attacks people in the dream world. He's not completely going on and attacking them mostly in reality. So that's where I went with this character. Moving on. Number 36, Blade. Finally, Blade is on this goddamn list. I am to go on and to have heard somewhere that Blade is to have only one live action variation of him, and that is completely wrong. Come to find out that there is a actual live action TV version of Blade, and so there technically is two different Blades. If all honesty, you don't also go on and count the animated or anime Blade. You don't also count the 90s Spider-Man Blade and a number of other things that Blade has always ever been in. Blade has had a huge, massive three movie franchise if you don't go on and count something else, because it's a movie. I can't go on and talk about it because I don't want to spoil anything for anybody with things. So, and content and stuff and wink, wink, nudge, nudge for some of you that are seeing this in the future. So, and I can't talk about it because it's a spoiler. So Blade. Blade, a lot of people probably only know him as Wesley, but there's a variety of different kinds of Blade. And also, there's a lot of interesting comic book stories with either Blade Max or other kind of Blades. I don't know. But either way, go ahead and if you love Blade, let me know in the comments below. Let's move on. And you're happy that he's at some point in this list, because maybe you're like, man, he just said that there weren't going to be really any comic book characters on here. Yeah, like I wanted to try to make this as wildly different as I possibly could. If anything, if I'm probably looking at Blade, I'm probably looking at him from the Wesley Snipes early films, rather than anything else. Because I didn't really like the TV show all that much, even though I watched a lot of it, just because it was trending for some weird reason. So, moving on. Wade Stantz, Winston Zeddemore from the real Ghostbusters. Again, I've already kind of talked about this, but Ray Stantz from the actual cartoon has a childlike wonder to him, and that's why I'm to go on and really thoroughly love that character, as well as also Winston is to be a very underrated character, even though he may not go on, and I feel have the best kind of stories, or uh, really just be nothing more in Frozen Empire than just another Vanna White character that goes on and shows the Ghostbusters, hey, this is that. Hey, here, we have all these new toys. Look at this and this and this. Yeah, Winston is just kind of that character. It's annoying. It's like, man, you couldn't have had anything for him to do, but just that to just be like, hey, here all these things new are. Ooh, yeah, look at this. Uh, Winston, I feel, is to have better used in the real Ghostbusters cartoon, and at some points it ends up that he is to be the last one really left to face off against whatever the ghost is for that episode. My favorite Winston episode is probably Night Game, where he had to go on and play baseball with a bunch of ghosts, and it was a thing between good and evil, and no one is neutral. Ray, I just kind of like him in everything. Like there never is I feel like a bad Ray stance, whether it's to be the live action films, regardless of how I don't like how those stories play out in the further sequels, or I can just go on and just like Ray eventually when he's actually just in the cartoons and probably nothing else. uh, and plus also like Ray honestly just kind of becomes like a very kind of just in betweener character. Like he is very smart and then also he is very dumb. Um so like they kind of they kind of play him for however like the story is to just need him to be played. So yeah, so all more reason for me to just thoroughly like that character and also realize that Ray's voice is to probably be the exact same as the guy who plays Fred and the other Scooby Doo cartoons. So let's move on. 38, Pinhead from Hellraiser. I know that this could be much more of a horror character, but we have the opening of the Pandora's box to lead to have Pinhead come out. It is to have these hooks that hook into people and create these very dark and gritty, supernatural-ish like stories. And like I feel that this character could be more supernatural than horror in all honesty. Not every single Hellraiser movie is to be all that good, but I've checked pretty much all, if not most of them out. Even the rebooted movie that just kind of like, okay, that was out, but it didn't really go anywhere. But logically, I think there's a whole reasoning for that because it's just like, okay, like what can you really do with Hellraiser that hasn't been done through tons and tons of other films? Like they've kind of done that character to death, and if anything, if they had a Hellraiser like show, like that would make a lot more sense. So uh like either Pinhead's either being a female or male, I don't really care. Because logically, either way, that character is just still interesting. So with that said, I logically just like Hellraiser. So if anybody is to go on and just not like Hellraiser because it's too like gory and whatever, like supernatural stuff as well as horror stuff should be gory, should be stuff that make you want to go on and be like, ugh, because that's what the genre is for. Like logically, you could go on and should explore more with with horror than anything else. Like if you're just gonna go on and just see one kind of horror kind of film, um, like that's fine. But it is what it is. Moving on to try to get this list faster done because I know I've been already talking for an hour and 30 minutes almost. Crowley from Supernatural, huzzah! He's here. I'm on the list. Everybody love Fergus from Supernatural. Crowley is a standout character that is to be the one that brings in the jokes. Also, I am to like the Crowley actor because at some point he had gone on the Michael Rosenbaum's uh, YouTube channel called Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum, and he talked about how he had gone on to have um, a heart attack and then another heart attack. I'm like, oh my god, like wow. And that just story was just like, man, like what a tale. Could make a book out of that whole story. Um, but it was just so like, oh my god. But yeah, Crowley is a really good character that is fun to play off with a number of other people, as well as him by himself is just really great. Um, how he was to deliver such good comedy in the show was to force us to want to figure out how he could be used on that show more. Even if it did make sense, just continue to have him on there. You kill him off, bring him effing back, because if he's not on here, I don't care to watch. Uh, so, with that said, Crowley has to be on this list, but then again, there's so many other characters to have talked about here. And also, I've already talked about a supernatural character as well. So, moving on. Slappy from Goosebumps. I just saw like Goosebumps the movie the other night, and I was like, you know what, Slappy, out of all the other Goosebumps characters, is very iconic on there. But everybody has their Goosebumps favorite. I get it. Uh, and then also some people will probably say that Slappy is an annoying character. Really, I just needed a ventriloquist character that is to be of a supernatural thing on this list somewhere, and I couldn't for the life of me go on and to have thought about that kind of just Scar or Scarface character from the Batman show, because then logically I would have had to have forced to have put uh, Batman on here somewhere. Because a lot of people be like, oh yeah, like Batman is to have been involved kind of in the Justice League Dark when it was the animated movie. I get it. Everybody wants me to put Batman on here somewhere, and I just stubbornly just don't want to. But then also, like, I didn't really want to put a ton of comic book characters on here. I really didn't, because I have a whole list of comic book characters already done. Like, I could go on and logically put together like a whole other list of just in general like comic book characters and just have fun with that. But then again, I think I've already kind of done that already. Like it would just kind of feel like I've kind of like I could be a biased character and just put all 50 Batman characters all in a thing, but it's just it would just feel like I've already done that already. So moving on. Like hence why I'm trying to break new ground by putting something different on this list than prior things. Moving on, number 41, Ursula from The Little Mermaid. I get it that people are like supernatural character. Yeah, she's a witch technically. So if anything, Ursula is to be the one to have taken the voice from Ariel. So like, give her mad props for that. That's the only thing that I really know Ursula from. I didn't really see at all the live action Little Mermaid movie because I didn't really care. And plus, also everybody was talking about how like everyone just focused on that main character, Ariel character, and how like nothing else is what I don't really care what anybody said about that live action film. I didn't really care about it because I didn't watch it. Like I was like, dude, I have like Little Mermaid other stuff that I could just be watching if I really wanted to watch Little Mermaid of all things. Why would I do that anyways? Uh, why would Little Mermaid be the one thing that I'm like, oh my god, I'm just so itching to watch right now? Why? But Ursula was the freaking bomb. Like she was like really cool to look at, and like also she was probably hot. Yeah. Ursula was the jam. Yeah. Like I was like, that Ursula though. Like F that Ariel chick. Move over to the side. Let's see that Ursula. Yeah. Why not? Yeah, give some mad props to like Ursula. Why not? Yeah, give her some time in the sun. I don't know, whatever. I'm making haha. I'm making hoo hoo. Moving on. Finishing up this goddamn list. Denji from the Chainsaw Man anime. So, Denji is to be the main character in the Chainsaw Man anime, and actually, the way that just kind of plays out is really fun. It could be annoying to some people because a lot of times it's just the Chainsaw Man character just screaming and yelling and whatever. But I really liked that show. It was really interesting how it all played out, and I talked about I think the whole first season on this channel at some point, so you can go and check that all out to just hear what I have to say about Chainsaw Man and how that show plays out. Uh, but yeah, so Chainsaw Man ends up kind of pulling a ripcord on his chest, and then ends up having a chainsaw for a head. And at the early part of that show, ended up having a little puppy looking chainsaw head character that was just kind of a little sweet little. If only I could have gone on and had like a replica of that little spud like thing, that would have been pretty cool. But anyways, uh, Chainsaw Man was a really interesting supernatural thing, and really liked it. Really thought it was cool. Don't know if it has another season out or whatever, because I am really out of the loop with anime, and plus also there's never really an anime that I feel does really popular on the channel. More than likely because if I was to have been a channel that just did anime, it would probably do super well. But then again, like, what do I know? I don't know enough about anime. I randomly go into anime titles, and half the time, it's anime stuff that is just to be convenient to really watch. Like the last anime thing that I went into was like Go Go Loser Ranger, and no one really cared about that. So I was just like, okay, like every time I go into some kind of anime thing, no one cares. So I'm just gonna go into just being forced to go back into like classic movies or retro stuff because I don't know what else is working. None of the new release stuff is really banging anymore, and it probably shouldn't anyways because there's rarefied air when it comes out to new releases. Or there's so much stuff coming out in streaming that it's like, who cares about uh, new release films anymore? Moving on. 43, The Spectre slash Dr. Fate from the DC world of things. I absolutely love the Spectre. My favorite version of the Spectre is to have been Hal Jordan as the Spectre. And then Doctor Fate, I liked him in Black Adam. He was the best thing in that movie. And then I would eventually find that Doctor Fate is to either be in stuff like Young Justice at some points and just other kind of content, the Justice League show, everything in between. I've gone on and state this already in the DC uh, list of things. You can check all that out. You can hear me talk about these characters a little bit more in depth. The Spectre did have a DC showcasing thing that you could probably go and check out, probably even on YouTube somewhere. And that thing is freaking awesome and off the chain. Moving on, number 44, Dante from Dante's Inferno. So, this, of course, is to be a character from a video game. I'm doing video game stuff. It's great. And so Dante from Dante's Inferno, like, well, Dante's Inferno is just a really like a person going into hell and going through all the seven sins and greed and gluttony and whatever all those seven deadlies. Probably could have put on a character, either Brad Pitt or uh, Morgan Freeman from movie Seven, but I think that was cheating a little bit if I would have gone on and done that. What's in the box? But anyways, Dante from Dante's Inferno, or just Dante's Inferno, also had an animated movie that kind of went all over the goddamn place, and you could tell that the movie was just kind of like handled from, like multiple different things, and it was just kind of weird how they were like putting it all together, and it really just came off like not a one smooth movie. It just kind of became like a lot of people just kind of chucking things together. It should have been more of a series than an actual like movie, but like I'm sure they're just like, dude, we don't have the money to to put an actual like show out, so we're just gonna put this out. But I really do like Dante. He's an interesting character. If you see his visuals, I'm like, oh my god, he looks like a crusader. And he's very guilt stricken by the times of which that he had gone on and had some side loving, uh, and that eventually gets in the end with his wife going on and being like forced down into hell, and Dante chasing after her. It becomes just a very interesting story, a very interesting tale. Check it out if you've never gone on and seen Dante's Inferno, because more than likely not a lot of gameplays probably have that on there because they would have to probably heavily censor it. And anyways, let's move on so I can wrap this up. 45, Demeter from Batman versus the Undead, or the Demon Etrigan from the DC book. We're kind of getting to the tail end here where I'm starting to try as much as possible to use supernatural characters from comic books because I just got lazy. But Demeter actually is involved in a interesting uh, Batman Confidential story, which I think was relabeled Batman versus the Undead. So Batman versus the Undead is a story about Batman teaming up with this vampire, I believe, character called Demeter, and they get into like all these adventures where, like, I think Superman ends up turning into a werewolf, and like it ends up getting further and further into this story that it looks very bleak that the characters are all going to get killed off, and because they realize how short and brief this story was really legitimately going to be. But then there's also a lot of interesting stuff about like Batman just kind of slicing zombies in half, like kind of from head to booty, and that really delivers a lot of interesting comic book visuals, and was to me to just kind of be a really fun comic book story that I really did like. And the Demon Etrigan, I'd gone on and talked a lot about that in the DC top 50 character list, but the Demon Etrigan had gotten used in the Batman: The Doom That Came for Gotham, I believe is the title. And also, he gets kind of sporadically used in certain other DC shows, and logically, this character at some point should have gotten his own kind of thing. He could also be, I think, showcased in the Justice League Dark movie, I think. Um, Moving on. Let's go to 46. Sam Wheat from Ghost. I recently saw the Ghost movie. I'm like, yeah, Sam Wheat should be on here. Give freaking Ghost some mad props and have him be a top supernatural character. Why not? But then also, I had mentioned Shigeyo Kageyama from Mob Psycho 100, which is also another anime. Mob Psycho 100 is a very funny supernatural anime. If you have never seen it, you honestly at least need to see the very first season. Uh, that story is just so funny. And it also is to be like a very like supernatural story. I think I had gone on and reviewed maybe uh just the one season, or maybe both season 1 and 2. I don't remember what's actually on here because I think I did review both seasons, but not each one of them made the cut here onto this channel. Because at that point, like I took a lot of content and I switched it from over here from a prior channel because I was making a review exclusive channel. But anyways, they're both on the list. Tyingly, bizarrely. Grimm, Nick Bernhardt. A lot of people probably have never gone on and seen the show Grimm, but man, was that show actually really interesting. So, we would have a Grimm like character that almost kind of plays off as like Constantine. And Grimm is to be able to see certain things that no one else can. That there is to be these things called Fuchsbaus and dragons and werewolves and all these kind of things in between that it seems will be actual human beings that would all of a sudden change and showcase this CGI'd like face. And then you're like, okay, what the heck is that? And it comes off as a very like very German-esque like show for whatever goofy reason. But it's actually rather interesting, and it kind of plays into the Brothers Grimm like story. But yeah, really a good show. I watched a lot of the seasons of it, and I think I may have gone on and wanted to review it on this channel, and I don't think it made it on there, or nobody really actually cared about that one because it's another sleeper hit. So If somehow I did review it on this channel, I probably don't remember at all, but it would be nice at some point to justify talking about that show because of how much I did really enjoy and like it. At some point, I would love to eventually just have a lot of people coming from some wild and random fan base to just rationalize me just doing a bunch of supernatural and horror like stuff rather than having to do anything else on this channel and have it really do well, surprisingly. Um, man, I'm really just overstating that, and I apologize. Uh, but like, this is the sad thing. I really love this content. I really do. And then when I put it into the channel, I'm just like, well, I guess I'm just forced to just watch something that I didn't want to watch today. So that way it'll do something on the channel. Um, that's just the heartbreaking thing for me that I love supernatural stuff so much so, but it's so obscure. Um, so let's move on to finish up this list because I know I've been talking for almost 2 hours now. Vida Raka from Power Rangers Mystic Force, she's the Pink Ranger. She eventually turns a vampire into that show. And also, I had put Diabolico from Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue on here because I didn't put him on the Power Rangers top 50 characters, as well as Vida wasn't on there as well. I really like Power Rangers Mystic Force and Lightspeed Rescue, and a demon and a quasi vampire like character was to just be really interesting for me. I probably could have also put the werewolf character from Jungle Fury, but I really didn't like that show in all honesty. There probably technically are really interesting supernatural characters within that show, but again, I just picked these two. Moving on. So I really gotta bash through this list. Sarah and Nancy from the movie The Craft. So these are kind of the main characters from the Craft movie. Sarah is to be kind of the good witch, and Nancy ends up being the bad witch. And so Nancy ends up having some girls that are just going to be at her side, and they face off against Sarah. But then Sarah, by the end of the film, ends up going on to be the hero. I think I had gone on and reviewed The Craft at some point in this channel, so you could probably check out my review of that if it still exists. Light as a feather, stiff as a board. Moving on. Also, Sandman from the Netflix series. I really did like how powerful that character really was. He reminded me a lot of the Spectre. And it seems that in the comic books, there's a wide variety of different kinds of Sandman that people can just visually like. But then also, I am to gravitate really well to this Sandman-like character for how this story is to be written out. Moving on, number 50 is to have been Pennywise from It. Logically, I couldn't have gone on and not had Pennywise somewhere on this list, but I didn't want to grade him all that high. I realized how Pennywise is just to be such an uber powerful character, even though also he is to be easily defeated by little kids, and then eventually, years later, adults. But so, Pennywise is to have not only 2 movies and a other one as well done with Tim Curry. And so for whichever one that you like of Pennywise, good on you. I can like all 3 of these films and just be like, I don't have a favorite. Uh, but then also, like, I felt that I was just kind of forced to have Pennywise on this, regardless of how I ultimately feel about the movies and whatever. Um, so moving on, this is the moving on. I guess you can't move on because I don't have any more on this list. I could have fudged and figured out other characters that I could have found a way to be on here, but I could probably just rattle off in my brain a number of other 30 things that I could have probably said. But I feel like I said a lot already in here to justify that there could have been a number of extra entries within this thing. I feel bad that I don't go on and have everybody's favorite, I'm sure. But then logically, there might have been a number of other favorites that people could be like, oh my god, like I am finding this show for the first time and I love it. Oh my god, thank you for going on and talking about this on this thing because I would not have gone on and ever found this show or this thing or this whatever. So with that said, I'm going to get the heck out of here. Hopefully I can go on and figure out a way to watch a 2 hour and 4 minute movie and not fall asleep afterwards. and try and review it and get a video out for today besides this one. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.